Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Whenever you might be catching us, I'm just super excited that you are here for another installment of the Richard Watkins podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence, nuclear fusion. We're going to talk a little bit about graduate school. So sit back, relax, and be prepared to learn something and have a great conversation. The Richard Watkins Podcast is a proud production of the Science Policy Action Network. Science Policy Action Network is one of the leading scientific and research engagement and consulting firms. If you have questions about the world rapidly changing around you, innovation in healthcare, innovation in education, or just innovation in general, SPAN or the Science Policy Action Network are your friends and partners as you look to make progress in the future. They're here to help you today. Visit the Science Policy Action Network at spn-inc.org. That's span-inc.org. Now, without further ado, let's get right into today's episode. Again, I'm Richard Watkins. Um, I, you know, I have the luxury, honor, privilege, and opportunity to give talks from time to time. I love to talk, right? That's why I have a podcast. I love to give speeches, and I have the opportunity to give speeches from time to time. Recently, I was invited to my alma mater, Fayetteville State University. Attitude check, Bronco pride. You know, if you know, you know. Um, for their homecoming weekend, and as part of that homecoming weekend, they have created now for the 15th year a panel of alums that come back and they are to inspire the next generation of scientific leaders. So this year, um, they thought enough of me to invite me to give the talk, the keynote address, and it was an incredible experience. I'm so fortunate, honored, and blessed to have had this opportunity. And, to be able to give the talk in front of so many accomplished Broncos who have gone out and have changed and are continuously changing the world for the better. It was just a huge honor and privilege. I also had an opportunity to engage undergraduates, students, and that's just always a huge treat to be able to talk with these students, these scholars who are so ambitious and who are so brilliant and so bright. I also had an opportunity to engage high school students who are ambitious, bright, brilliant, um, as well. And they were asking questions about, graduate school and how you become a PhD. And that is actually a question that I get a lot. Now, I've touched on it before on the podcast, but I think it's appropriate for us to dive into that conversation again. At my church, we have a musician who is aspiring to be a physician, and they are asking, what about research? What about scientific research? And what I've found over time is that so few people understand the process that is the process that is undertaken by an individual to become a scientist, specifically a PhD recipient. I was at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I helped run their Chancellor Science Scholars program. At the time, it was one of the world's greatest undergraduate scientific training programs, and half of our students went to medical school. The other half of our students went to graduate school to become scientists. And when students came in, oftentimes they only were aware of medical school and becoming a physician. Very few of them knew what a scientist, was. They have a vague idea, but um, many of them didn't realize what it was and how you could go about it and how to become one. And so a lot of them ended up doing it because they realized, and I'll tell you here this now, that um, the profession or the title of a PhD in science, it has a tremendous utility. Um, if you get your MD, for better or worse, with very few exceptions, you are going to be, in a clinical setting, right? But if you're a PhD in, the basic or applied sciences, you can find yourself in a wide variety of occupations, right? You can obviously start your own business. You can be in the academy, conducting research, whether it's as a principal investigator or part of a core facility. You can work for a national laboratory, such as, Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories. You can work for, obviously, the government. You can work for the private sector, for any number of our nation's incredible private research facilities. There's just so many things you can do. But I guess we should start with kind of discussing, how science and how getting a PhD in the sciences is unlike anything you have ever really done before. I talk to students at the elementary, middle, high school, graduate, undergraduate level. I mean, even postdocs, faculty. And one of the conversations that we end up having is this realization that science education is not science. And that's not a slight, that's not an insult, but it's not science. Science education is the memorization and regurgitation of information, of things that have already been found, discovered, analyzed, and described. So it's memorization and regurgitation. That is science education. It's essential, it's critical, it's important. But for the most part, that is science education. What science is, however, is the exploration of the unknown. Now, folks may beg to differ, but that is the distinction that I draw and the distinction that I communicate, right? Science education quite often does not prepare you for science or to be a scientist. It is important, but it is not science, right? It's important to understand the world around you. That's science education. But the exploration of the unknown, you know, is science. So what it takes, now anybody can become a scientist, but what classical scientific training usually includes at its terminal level is a PhD. Now, when you go into undergrad, and what I mean by undergrad is undergraduate training that is when you go to college. Um, and you usually get a bachelor's of science. My bachelor's of science was in psychology, for example. What you do in undergrad does not dictate or determine what you do at the graduate level. Now, many times, if you are going into graduate school in what is known as the basic sciences, you are classically trained at the undergraduate level at in the basic sciences. I'm an exception because my PhD is in microbiology and immunology. However, my bachelor's of science is in psychology. But most people who go the route of microbiology and immunology, cellular biology, genetics, they are classically trained at the undergraduate level in biology. If they're doing chemistry, organic chemistry at the graduate level, they are trained in chemistry at usually chemistry majors at the undergraduate level. So I was an exception in that regard. So when you're in undergrad, you are taking classes, you are performing to the best of your ability. Um, Obviously, if you're listening to this and you're a student, you're going to want to get as good of grades as you possibly can. But not just that, you're going to want to begin to build your network as an undergrad. That's going to be very, very critical. Many undergrads I see simply go through their college, their collegiate experience, and they only focused on grades, coursework. And that's important. You have to do that. But you must also do other things. And forming your network is really, really important because what will be needed to get into graduate school are both, your grades and having that impressive coursework and that academic background. But what's also going to be important are what are known as letters of recommendation. Those letters of recommendation are very, very, very important. Letters of recommendation, and most folks know exactly what this is, but if you don't, I'll tell you. Letters of recommendation are letters that are written on your behalf that are supposed to speak highly of you. So, of course, you're going to speak highly of yourself, right? Self promotion. I mean, that's of course, right? I mean, a lot of people don't like doing that, but I mean, you need to be good at it. Self promotion is really, really important. But you're also going to need people to advocate on your behalf. You're going to also need people to corroborate your claims that you are special, right? That you are brilliant, that you can contribute at the graduate level and ultimately to society and the world. So you're going to need to form relationships throughout your undergraduate experience that are going to be useful in that regard. So when you are performing well, especially if it's a class that you like and it's a class that you think is going to be important, or it's a class related to something that you would like to go into, you're going to want to perform well in that class. But you're going to also want to begin talking to that professor and letting that professor know that you have plans to go to graduate school. Talk to them about their experiences and do that throughout the duration of your semester. You might take that professor again for another course, but you're going to want to stay in contact. Go to office hours, stay after class, maybe get to class early, whenever you can catch that professor and pick their brain, not only about the subject matter, but about your academic grooming, your academic training, and how you want to take it to the next level. Another thing that you're going to want to do is you're also going to want to gain research experience. Now, this is different from the coursework that involves lab, you're going to want to gain research experience somewhere. Now, whether that's during the summer or during the academic calendar year, you're going to want to be able to do research. That is in the lab of a researcher. And a lot of questions that I get are how do I gain these research experiences? So we'll start with the summer research. A simple Google search, a simple search within ChatGPT or any large language model will yield results regarding your queries on summer research experiences. So start exploring those research experiences as soon as possible. Weekends are an excellent time. I don't think it can ever be overlooked, or I don't think the importance of understanding summer research experiences can be should ever be understated, right? Or I don't think it can be overstated how important it is. So begin doing that. And I would argue do that from the very beginning. So if you're a parent of a college student or a student going into college, make sure you're on them about what they're doing during the summer. Encourage them to do summer research experiences. And I would recommend they start as soon as the summer following their first year. I mean, that's as soon as possible. So look for those summer research experiences, some of which are they provide a stipend, some of which are competitive, but look for those experiences. Many universities have them, many private institutions have them, but look them up and participate in them. Many government research facilities also have them as well. But you can also look at doing research throughout the standard academic year. So that's your fall semester and that's your spring semester. And the way you go about doing that is searching that university's website or searching departments within that university. So, say for instance, you're interested in genetics, right? So, go to the Department of Genetics at that institution that you're at, right? So whether it's the University of Florida, University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, California, Berkeley, just look up those departments, pull up their faculty. Now, when you go to those faculty pages, each individual faculty, whether they're tenured full professor, whether they're associate or assistant professors, and those are just classifications of professors, by the way, if you don't know what they are, right? So your full professor, assistant professor, associate professor. It usually just says professor, assistant professor, associate professor. But just, yeah, those are different distinctions, but all of them do research, right? So just find the type of research that interests you, the type of research you're asking, the questions that you're curious about. Just find the most interesting thing and don't rush into it. Take your time. Spend a little time each and every night after you've completed your homework, after you've completed your studies, maybe before you go to bed, maybe right before you eat dinner, after you eat dinner. Just do a little research, maybe 30 minutes to 45 minutes, reading through faculty's descriptions. They could be at your institution or they could be at neighboring institutions. You might live in an area or go to a school where within short distance there's another university. That's not everywhere, but in a lot of places you could find clusters of institutions that are within driving distance of each other. Look up research that's interesting to you. Once you find research that is interesting to you, don't be afraid of getting that email address of that researcher and emailing them. Now, spend a little time drafting that email. Have a respected peer, a peer who's writing that you like, who you feel is a strong writer. Have them read over your email until you start getting confident in your ability to write and send emails. Know how to properly address the person that you're sending an email to. I would say do not use, common speak. Don't use slang. Be professional. I'll say, hey, what's up? And try to be as professional as possible. Now, that professor, they can come back to you however they want to, but for you, you be as professional as possible. Talk to them, ask them about any research opportunities that might be available. Or better yet, just state that you have read their description of their research and you find the work that they do absolutely fascinating. And if they have time to talk to you further about that research, ask for any time. Let them know your availability, right? Now, they might get back to you, they might not. These professors are oftentimes really busy managing their laboratory, uh, managing collaborations. It's a lot. So be patient. After a week, if you don't hear back, follow up. So that's the first step. Um, I'm going to, move on past that. There's a lot involved with that, but those are some strategies to get your foot in the door. Because once you get that meeting and you're talking about research, the next thing you're going to ask is there any opportunity for you to gain research experience with them? Now, you might not start off doing research. You might start off by washing dishes. And for folks who don't know, labs utilize a lot of equipment, and that equipment often has to be cleaned. And so that's what I refer to as washing dishes. Many people's first research experience is washing dishes, not actually doing research, but you just have to get your foot in the door. Because once you get your foot in the door, then more opportunities come. All right, so let's rush on past that. So a letter of recommendation can come from a professor who you perform well in their class. Another letter of recommendation can come from and should come from a professor that you conduct research with. So one professor is attesting to your academic abilities. The other professor is writing a letter of recommendation in regards to your research abilities. So those are two very, very powerful stories and narratives that you want told about you. Now, again, this is at the undergraduate level. And then I think being part of a campus organization is really, really important. There are different scientific organizations, there are different charitable organizations. Be involved with something. Maybe it's student leadership, get involved with something. I think it's also good for a letter of recommendation to come from that group you're a part of. And many university recognized student organizations are required to have a faculty advisor. That faculty advisor is that person you want to go to for a letter of recommendation. So you got your letter of recommendation, you've got the experience, you've done well, you applied, you're in the graduate school. And I can go back. I'm rushing through, but now you're in graduate school. This is where everything really kind of changes because now you're in graduate school, and graduate school experience is different from institution to institution. Even within an institution, they're different between departments. So I'm just going to give you kind of a general experience of what you might expect. So your first year as a graduate student in the basic sciences, let's just stick with, genetics, right? We can do cellular biology. It doesn't matter. We'll just stick with genetics, for example. So your first year, you are probably going to be taking classes, and you might think to yourself, "Oh, this is just like undergrad." Maybe that's the only part that's kind of like undergrad are your courses. That first year, you're going to take courses. But in addition to taking courses, what you will also be doing, you will also be undertaking, you'll be completing what are known as rotations. And so within the calendar year, you will do maybe three rotations. And so you'll divide that calendar year up by three, right? So three rotations. And a rotation is time spent in a research group or in a lab. And you're going to want to choose these research groups wisely because ultimately, at the end of all three rotations, you will select the lab or research group, sorry, the laboratory or research group that you would like to join and ultimately do your dissertation within. Now it goes both ways, right? You're not just choosing, it's both the laboratory is kind of interviewing you and you're also interviewing the laboratory. You're going to want to kind of understand whether that laboratory environment and culture is one that you see yourself in for the next 4 or 5 years. If they have the resources, funding, that's going to be required for you to complete your dissertation successfully, do the experiments that you need to do, ask the questions that you want to ask. You're going to also want to kind of get an understanding of whether or not the PI, the principal investigator, you have a good relationship with that principal investigator because they're going to be your mentor. They are going to be your dissertation advisor. They won't necessarily chair your dissertation committee, but they're going to be one of the most important people in your life, at this stage of your life. So you're going to want to choose carefully, right? That you're going to want to know if they're doing hot research, if they're funded well, if the environment and the culture is healthy and supportive, and if that principal investigator, your mentor, is going to be a good mentor. You choose a lab, the lab you choose likes you, you join that lab. Great. Now you're going to take a brief pause in everything you've done. You've done your coursework. After your first year, there's no more classes, right? It's really kind of all about research from here on out. You're going to do a preliminary exam or a qualification exam, right? So they're sometimes called comps, they're sometimes called quals, they're sometimes called prelims. And that is a big examination that the department uses to judge whether or not you are, up to snuff. If you meet their standard, and different departments do this examination different from others, right? So my preliminary exam was that you had to write a a research grant um, that would be funded, and you select a panel of faculty members to evaluate your proposal, and then they determine whether your proposal would have, in fact, been awarded a grant, right, by a funding agency. Many of the researchers that you put on the panel have themselves served on study sections. A study section is a panel of experts that determine whether or not a proposal will be awarded, right? A grant. So they know what they're doing. So they determine whether or not your proposal is good or not, whether or not you pass or fail. And once they determine whether you pass, they then bring you in for an in-person meeting at which you have to defend that proposal orally and in person. And in my experience, and in many people's experience, it involves a lot of drawing on a whiteboard, making sure that you understand processes, make sure that you understand experimental designs, pathways, just making sure that you understand, you know, what they think you should understand. I mean, it's different from one experience to another. So, your experience is going to be determined by your proposal and by your preliminary exam committee or your qualification exam committee or your comps, right? Um, Competency exam, right? So it's going to be determined by that. All right, so once you pass that, you are now a PhD candidate. So before that, you're just a graduate student. But once you pass your prelims, your quals, your comps, you're now a PhD candidate. And you really, at that point, start digging into your research. And your eye at that point has to always be on the prize. Many departments have a publication requirement in which you have to be first author on maybe two publications. So you have to have two first author publications. Research papers are really, really important. They're the lifeblood of universities because they bring in grants, they show proof of concept. And so, therefore, authorship is really, really important. And authorship is who wrote the paper, who did the research. The most important authors, a research paper can have many authors, but the most important authors are the first author and then the last author. The last author refers to who the principal investigator is, right? Whose lab was this research done in? The first author is maybe tied. I don't know who's the most important. It depends on who you ask. The first author is who did the research, who wrote the paper. So, last author, whose lab, whose research group. The first author, who did the research, who wrote the paper. So many departments say that you have to write two first author publications. So that means you have to do work. And these research papers, so a lot of times people are confused. They throw the word research around all the time. But what I'm referring to here is making a discovery. So understand this. You have to have two first author publications, and your dissertation is this giant manuscript that describes the body of research that you've done as a graduate student, right? Over the course of 4, 5, 6 years sometimes, right? And you write this up. And a book. I've got a hardbound book at my house that's my dissertation. In it are all my publications, and you write it up and you thread it together in maybe a single solid narrative. But understand this, and this is where a huge difference comes. To write a dissertation, to defend your dissertation, and to become a PhD and to be a PhD recipient, you have to discover something that no human has ever discovered before. Nobody who's ever come before you, all the geniuses, Aristotle, Einstein, Plato, uh, George Washington Carver, Benjamin Banneker, no one has ever discovered Madame Curie. No one has ever seen it before. That's a huge difference from most other kind of professions or most other kind of terminal to degrees. You have to extend the collective knowledge, the collective understanding of humanity. That is what is required to get your PhD. And you write that up and you defend it. And the private defense can be a grueling process. A group of experts pick apart your dissertation. Now they're there to help you, right? You've worked with them, all the way up until this point. But sometimes that defense is in fact a defense of your ideas, of your research approach. So you do that privately, and then many times there is a public defense. That's where you present your dissertation, you present your body of work, to the public. After you've completed those things, your dissertation is accepted. You are a PhD, Dr. such and such. So in my case, Dr. Richard Watkins, right? So that is what it takes. In my opinion, I mean, not to discredit anything, it is probably I think it's the highest level of anything, right? A lot of times in journalism, they write and they only give that term doctor to physicians, and they usually refer to PhDs as name, comma, PhD or nothing at all, as if the distinction of an MD is somehow higher than a PhD. But understand, an MD is not discovering anything, right? They're applying knowledge to improve health, but really only your scientists, only your researchers, only your PhDs are creating new knowledge, and that's really really huge. That's really really huge. Shifting gears a little bit is science and different, you know, professions. They have societies. Like, for example, I am a member of Sigma Xi, the Scientific Research Honor Society. And not only that, I'm the president of the UNC chapter of Sigma Xi. Sigma Xi is one of the world's oldest scientific research honor societies. And in that society, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill's chapter is one of the oldest and most prestigious. Last year, our chapter was given the distinct honor of being the host and organizers of the Pariser Global Lecture Series, right? This is where we bring together uh, the best research or scientific breakthrough in the world. We bring somebody in to serve as the Pariser Global Lecture. And so some of the huge breakthroughs that we were considering was, of course, artificial intelligence. That's really, really huge because I I am aware that most people feel that nothing has had the impact on society in regards to innovation like artificial intelligence will. And in a lot of ways, they're right. The impact that artificial intelligence has already had on our society is incredible. For example, I know many people haven't thought about this. Many people use a large language model such as ChatGPT or Grok. Those are just two. I know there's others. There's Claude. And forgive me if I'm leaving another one out, right? They use these applications, these large language models to make decisions from everything from, how do I fix this broken thing? What painting do I choose? Help on a video game, but also how to engage with each other. Hey, I'm having this issue or I want to do this. And so they'll say, like, for example, I was talking about how to create a relationship with a professor so they can get you a letter of recommendation. You might ask a large language model, hey, I want to talk to this professor. Do you have any advice? And yeah, talk, and the message will come back. Yeah, talking to a professor is a great way to expand your network, especially if you're ultimately going to approach them later on to secure a letter of recommendation. One approach could be stay after class. Follow up with them regarding an issue or a topic in class, and then at the end of that, let them know, excuse me, let them know that you're thinking about graduate school. You see that, and you're like, that's exactly what you do. So you stay after class, you talk to the professor about an item or a topic in class, and then that provides a natural opportunity opening for you to transition to then talking about your desires for graduate school. Boom. I think that's an interesting phenomenon because the human experience at that point is now being directly impacted by artificial intelligence. So the human behavior, human interaction, even by somebody like your professor who might not even be using that large language model, they don't even know that you as a student are now interacting with them through the filter of a large language model. That's just amazing, right? How now human interactions are being shaped by artificial intelligence. I think that's just absolutely fascinating. And a lot of people don't, I don't know. Maybe people think about it all the time, but to the extent of which you don't know how many interactions that you're having on a day-to-day basis with another person are being motivated by large language models. This is interesting to think about. Also interesting to think about, and we've obviously done episodes on this before, is, you know, large language models taken to a whole nother level. A lot of people are really focused, understandably, on super intelligence. And that's understand. But I feel, and I might be wrong, but I feel that most people that I see on podcasts, on the news, on television, you name it, are looking at artificial intelligence and super artificial intelligence or general super artificial intelligence, whatever name you want to give it, basically where artificial intelligence surpasses the intellect, the collective intellect of every single person, right? To the point where you just can't even keep up with it through the lens of the binary. And that is computation that is predicated on zeros and ones. But very few I hear mention the step, the massive leap that will be taken that I believe will blow any artificial intelligence that's based on zeros and ones or the binary out of the water, and that's quantum computing. And we've already had an episode on computing, but very few people really kind of dive into that. So I think on the horizon, and that's one of the things that we really have to think about, are obviously what are the ramifications of artificial intelligence on society and on the human experience? What will it mean for, general intelligence? What will it mean for super intelligence? But what does that even mean when artificial intelligence is combined with quantum computing? I I think that is beyond imagination. And I don't think enough people are talking about, but what is a conversation on it? We always say not enough people are talking about I mean, what is even a conversation on it? It's so beyond our imagination and understanding that I'm not quite sure what purpose a conversation on the merger of artificial intelligence with quantum computing will even have, because the speculations in your wildest imagination, I just don't think will even come close to grasping what it would mean. Also, what we are seeing is massive, massive developments in regards to human machine interface. Obviously, we've done episodes on that. What does a human machine interface mean when also combined with artificial intelligence? I think a little bit of that is how will humans remain? How will we remain? I said humans as if I'm not a human. How will we remain in an intellectual arms race with artificial intelligence, and perhaps the merger of machine with mind will be what is needed for us to remain, the apex intelligence? I don't know. So that's one question. Obviously, another question, right, is when we blend all of these things together, with automation and robotics. And robotics are phenomenal. And we're just at the tip of the iceberg of what robotics will be, but are absolutely amazing. The incredible developments in robotics, whether you're talking about Tesla, whether you're talking about Boston Dynamics or any number of the international companies that are engaged in robotics development, that merger between, artificial intelligence and robotics. And one of the things that I think is interesting is I think there is a tendency to believe that the finest form of robotics is one that emulates a person, but I don't know if that's true. I mean, I don't know if the form of a human as like a robotic emulating human is even the top form, and it's interesting to see where that goes and where that develops and what that will look like. But one of the other things that a lot of people are concerned with and are the energy demands. So right now, you know, data centers which are involved with these large language models require a tremendous amount of energy to operate. And there have been growing concerns over, where that electricity, that energy, will come from. Will we be able to meet the demands of the data centers in regards to the consumption of electricity? And I want to bring it all the way back to last year's Paris or Global Lecture, because I think this is a very interesting, I think this will impact AI, robots, machine, the world, maybe beyond anything. And I know a lot of people are looking at AI as like the biggest, and it could be, but I think perhaps this is the biggest. Last year, 2024, the Paris or Global Lecture featured Dr. Kim Boudil. Dr. Kim Boudil is the director of Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories. Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories have been an absolute pioneer in regards to fusion energy. And let's just back up really quick. So, right now, we get our energy primarily from fossil fuels. We have solar, we have wind, and we have nuclear. Nuclear is probably our greatest energy technology. Um, its efficiency is high. In regards to the energy production, we don't have anything that matches it. Now, every, nuclear energy source that we use relies on fission, which is the splitting of atoms. And that produces energy, and it produces a great deal of energy. However, I think I made a mistake in what I just said. I said most of our energy comes from fossil fuels. Nuclear energy, in regards to fission, is our most powerful source of energy, but I think I'm wrong on both accounts. Our most widely used form of energy, and it has been since the beginning of human existence, the beginning of time, has been the sun. I shouldn't say the beginning of time because depending on whether you're a follower of Genesis or the Big Bang Theory, obviously our sun hasn't always existed. So we'll cover that in another episode. But for as long as humans have existed, which in the grand scheme of things, again, depending on what you believe, hasn't been that long, has been the sun. Now, the sun utilizes something a little bit different. It utilizes fusion to produce copious amounts of energy, to put it plainly. Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories, and I think there's other groups, have in recent times made huge breakthroughs in regards to fusion energy, being able to produce energy from the merger or the collision or the fusion of atoms. That process creates incredible amounts of energy. And that breakthrough has been made, and in many accounts, to use layman terms, what we have accomplished collectively as humans, I didn't do it, but collectively as humans was, for lack of a better term, created a star, that breakthrough. What will result down the road from that breakthrough is the elimination of our energy needs. So the conversations that we're having about how will we meet the needs of these data centers, how we meet the energy needs of the world, with the breakthroughs of nuclear fusion, those conversations will soon be ancient history. With that, with the development of this technology, all of our energy needs will be met. A lot of energy, carbon emission gone. It's a tremendous power that will transform the trajectory of the human experience forever. I believe I said that correctly. I wanted it to have a little punch at the end. Yeah, I believe I said that correctly. Like always, I'll put links for all of these things in the chat. So we had an opportunity to talk about graduate school, artificial intelligence, and we dabbled in nuclear fusion. All of these topics we'll need to explore in greater detail in future episodes, but I just wanted to give you a little taste of those things that were top of my mind here on today's episode of the Richard Watkins podcast. I have been your humble host, Dr. Richard Watkins. Thank you, each and every one of you, for being with us today. Remember that the Richard Watkins podcast is a proud production of the Science Policy Action Network. Check them out at span-inc.org. And remember that the future is not something to wait for, but it is something to build. Until next time, take care.